is attempt to make those available for you as a kind of a library item. And Bill has some ways in which we can put them on YouTube, so you can go to them and they will automatically have closed captioning, which is good for some of our folks who don't have the greatest hearing anymore, like me. The second thing is, and thank you, Bill, for your work. We really appreciate it. The second thing is that I just learned that tomorrow at 2 p.m. In the Mount Tom room is going to be a birthday party for Marnie Smith. Marnie is moving to Maine, I believe, in November. And so this is a birthday party for her, and I know many of you know her. She's the one that was, along with Susan Lance, pushed the Green Burials program that we had the end of June. And so if you want to say goodbye to her or say happy birthday, that's when you can do it. The second thing is that, as you'll see, there's a handout on your seats, and if you have the handout and you're part of a couple, could you please leave one so we have plenty for the other campus. And if you would prefer an email handout, just send me an email saying, please send me the handout, and I will email it to you. And that handout is an attachment which has hyperlinks, so you can immediately go to the appropriate site that you're interested in learning more about. I want to say, though, one thing about the handout which is important for you to know. Aside from funeral homes and burials, which cost, of course, some money to do, and we're going to learn about that in a few minutes. The University of Massachusetts has an anatomical gift program, and if you wish to, you can apply to that program, and if they accept you, then within 24 hours you're passing. Medical school will pick up your body, take it to the medical school, and be used to educate students or do various kinds of research. And eventually you receive back the cremains after they've completed their work and the learning that they hope to get. Now the problem with this is that it's not guaranteed. So, and this is not included in this statement, and I wish it was. So it's important for you to know that you need a plan B. So that in a plan B situation, you can have an arrangement so your relatives will know what to do after you've passed away. I think, for an example, if a person is in a severe automobile accident, the body may not be eligible for the kind of use that they want to put it to. So I just wanted to make that sure. The last two programs that we've presented have been on hospice and green burials. Those programs were initiated because you asked for them. This program was initiated because some of you asked for it. And I have one more program which has been asked for, which has to do with what are the essential documents you need to have available that can make the settlement of your estate easier. And in October, I'm hoping that we will have a representative of the probate court come and speak about that and tell you the kinds of documents you need. And it's really important because if my son, who is the executor of my estate, doesn't have my birth certificate, he's got to chase around and get it. Doesn't have our wedding certificate, he has to chase around and figure out where it is and how to get a copy of it that's viable. It can be a mess. And so this is all a way of making it easier for you. That program will be in October. So that's basically my intro. I want to introduce now our panelists. Chris and Emily are both representatives of the Ahearn Funeral Home. I can tell you that the Ahearn Funeral Home has been recommended to me a number of times by various people, and always in an extremely positive way. And so they will make a presentation of maybe, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or thereabout. And then it'll be open for a Q&A, and I know that you're going to have questions that you'll want to ask them. So, Chris and Emily, it's up to you now.
So bear with us on the technology here. We just plugged our flash drive in to make sure this works properly. Thank you, Mark. I'm Chris Powers, and this is Emily Popran. This is my work wife. My regular wife's at work today, and her husband is also at work. Just let's clarify that. So I've been a field director for 39 years. I'm a little older than I look, I think. I don't know, some people said I've aged well. I don't think so. But and I've worked here in the Valley my entire life. I grew up in South Deerfield, and I got started with a small little funeral home up there called Risley Funeral Home. And I was a farm boy. And we were a local fire department. You did everything in town. So I was one of the guys that was a little more resilient when it came to death. And the two Risley boys said, "Gee, Chris, maybe you should think about this career." And I kind of like, no, I don't think so. But here I am 39 years later. So we're going to give a little presentation. I know you've done a green burial and they've gone over hospice and stuff. We're just going to talk a little bit about funerals and the types of funerals. And then I'm going to keep it short and brief. And then we'll do a Q&A session afterwards. So if you want to pick our brains in that. So we can go on to the next slide. And it's going to jump over there. Technology. So funerals. There's multiple kinds of funerals, but little what everybody deals with nowadays is cremation or a traditional burial funeral. One of the newer points is green burial. I know you had that presentation, and last year when Emily and I kind of took over Ahearn's after Mike Ahearn passed, we made a point of going out and getting ourselves certified. So not every funeral home can do a green burial. The Green Burial Council wants us certified along those lines. So we both made the effort to go to classes, get approved, and learn the things that they wanted and what we can provide you. Cremation, you probably all are maybe familiar with cremation. We have two crematories in the area in Springfield, Hillcrest Park, and Springfield Cemetery and Crematory. They've both been around a very long time. And the funeral home in Massachusetts cannot own a crematorium. We have to contract out to another crematory. They don't allow us to have a crematory on site, so we use the two local crematories in Springfield. And traditional burial, that's kind of self-explanatory. A traditional funeral service with a visitation or a wake, perhaps a church service, perhaps a funeral home service. Sometimes people opt for a graveside service. We've had people have wakes in locations. A good friend of mine, Harry Spencer, if anybody's from the area, might know that name. Harry's a funeral director for 50 years, and we had a wake, and he was waked at the Glendale Grill over in East Hampton, and he was in the Glendale Grill. We brought him in on a Saturday. That was his last request. He didn't want a funeral. We put his casket up. We put a glass of wine on top of his casket. We had the priest come in and did the prayers. And it was nice. As a funeral director, it's out of the norm. I liked it though. Yes. And people were coming in and go, "Is that a memorial service for Harry?" I go, "Oh, he's here." I go, "Oh, he's dead, isn't he?" I go, "Yes, he is." They came in and go, "He buried my mother. He buried my father." And that's what he wanted. And the boys over there said, "Go ahead and do it." So somebody says to me, "You want to be in a library or a location? We can go anywhere you want." So something different. We'll go on to the next one, and I think this is going to be a green burial slide. And I'm not going to dwell on that too long because I think you had a pretty good cremation. So cremation is a process of I was just going to go over it. Okay. So cremation is the process of reducing the body to its natural elements, resembling ash. It involves exposing the body to flame and heat. That's the technical term for it. Again, we use Springfield Crematory and Hillcrest Park Crematory. Springfield is just in the middle of retrofitting their retorts, and they have purchased some new Swedish design retorts. Typically the process takes 2 to 3 hours. These retorts will be done in 55 minutes. It's very controlled by the EPA to the point where it is monitored by an outside entity completely. So they go through the process in Massachusetts. When someone dies, we go through the process of filling out a death certificate, select a disposition as cremation. When you die in Mass, a doctor will sign your death certificate. But everyone in Massachusetts that's cremated has to be seen by the medical examiner. And a single fold reason, don't be offended, they want to make sure there's no foul play. So when you cremate somebody, there's no recourse to come back. So during that time period, while you're with our care, we contact the medical examiner, we either go to them, they come to us, they do an examination of the person. They're gonna examine you, go through, make sure it looks okay. If you have a pacemaker, we have to get permission from you to remove the pacemaker, because that's a very loud bang in the crematory. So we remove the pacemaker out and then make those provisions, and then onto the crematory for the cremation process, and then you return to our care, and then we talk to the family what the next step is. Okay? Natural burial, where the body is placed directly in the soil. It's environmentally friendly. Green embalming as opposed to embalming with chemicals. Shroud and willow caskets and no vault. Green embalming, it's a regular embalming process. I'm a certified embalmer, but I'm also a certified green embalmer. And the green embalming fluid is not formaldehyde. It's alcohol-based, which breaks down with the body. So it does not have any long-term preservation effects. But occasionally, a family will come to us and say, we want to have a green burial, but we want people to come in and see us, see the person. So we can use a natural green embalming fluid, certified. We have gone through the training, both Emily and I more so, that's my strong point. And then natural burial, all the cemeteries, we have lists of all the cemeteries. That's a willow casket. But they don't, some cemeteries, most of them that do green burial don't require a casket. So if that's the case, when you come back into our care, we use refrigeration. You're placed in a shroud. If anybody's of the Jewish descent, it's a heavier shroud than a normal shroud. It's a heavy shroud, and you're placed in a shroud. That's it. There's no casket. You don't need to purchase a casket. I'm not going to try to sell you a casket because you don't need it. It's just a shroud, and we transport you to the cemetery. We make arrangements with the cemetery to have the grave open at that time. Typically, a lot of times the family wants to be there to lower the person into the gravesite. So we ask the family to step in, and we use straps and very gently lower the person to the gravesite. So that is all done all at the gravesite. If there's a funeral home viewing or anything, we may select a casket if possible. We can also have rental caskets. You don't have to have that casket. So we could have you in a shroud, have a viewing at the funeral home. If you say, I don't want that casket, Chris, that's fine, out you come. And we take you over in your shroud to the cemetery. So you don't need to make that extra purchase. And no vaults are needed pending the cemetery rules. More and more the cemeteries locally are getting better about this. I said, you're defeating the whole cause of a green burial when you're making me order a vault for the family. It makes no sense. So a lot of them are really starting to bend the rules. We just had a new cemetery open in Montague called Highland Woods just last year. I don't think they've had 5 burials up there, but beautiful ground. We just went up for a service up there. Gorgeous piece of property. And I think that's it for that part of it. We'll get to the questions because I'm sure you're gonna have some. I talk very fast, I'm Irish. I grew up with 9 siblings, so you had to get a word in edgewise. Traditional burial, open or closed casket. Embalming is used for open casket viewing to the public. Embalming is not a law. It's only a law if the casket's going to be open. If you tell us there's not going to be any viewing, no one's going to see mom or dad or whomever, we don't embalm you. You'll be placed in our refrigeration. We hold you. We still get you dressed, comb your hair, set your features. I'll be very blunt about that. We close your eyes, close your mouth. We'll get you dressed. And if there's a brief period somebody wants to see somebody, by all means, we'll not discourage that you can have a viewing. So private family viewings are an option. That's part of that. Okay, on to the next one. Pricing estimates for cremation. We've got cremation, green burial, and traditional burial. Cremation, our price for cremation, for direct cremation, which means from the time you pass to the time we get to the crematory, that fee is $37.25. That includes our professional services, holding of the person in our care, an alternative container. When you're cremated, you don't need a casket, but the crematories here require a rigid container. And the nicest way for me to put that is it's the old pine box. There's no interior or anything in it.
Okay.
Green barrels are $3,500. There's a little bit a lower price because with the cremation you have to pay the crematory and the medical examiner. With green barrel, we're just holding you, shrouding you. That's all included in that price tag, the shroud, and then transporting over to the cemetery where you're going to be buried. In a traditional burial, I kind of base that on the least expensive casket, the least expensive vault. It's all what you pick out. Some people come in and give mom the best. I'm a Yankee. Don't do that. Those days are gone. Just pick out something nice and simple. COVID changed, funeral service changed our world. We didn't have contact with families for a year and a half. We didn't see anybody. It was all remote. And I tell families, do not come in here and buy a $6,000 mahogany casket. I'm not going to sell to you. You don't need it, and honestly, it's a waste, to be perfectly honest. So we try to keep things very simple, very conservative, but have a nice pricing and a lower cost. I see you smiling. The days of the big funerals are gone. It's gone. I worked at Waterman's Funeral Home in Boston in the 80s when I started this business, and we handled the Chinese population, and a $50,000 to $60,000 funeral was not unusual. 25 to 30 limousines, massive mahogany caskets, 80, 90 pieces of flowers. That was, and it's still the norm down there. Wing Fook is the big Chinese funeral home. But each ethnicity is different. I would never even present an expensive casket to somebody, and Emily wouldn't either. So on to the next one. What else we got? Pre-need money. So when you pre-arrange your funeral, where does your money go? The first thing I tell people is, I don't care if you pay us, but write down your wishes. Because when your family comes in and you've got 5 kids or 8 kids, or in my case, 9 kids, Mom wanted cremation, no, Mom wanted a burial, no, Mom wanted a green burial. If it's written down, even if you prearrange, just put it in writing and tell people what your wishes are. Make sure the family's aware of that fact. That's the biggest part of it. So I encourage that before, we don't even talk money, we just talk, what do you want to do? Make sure it's in writing somewhere. So if something happens unexpected, it's there. I have my pre-arrangement written down because I travel off and on, and I'm going to be airborne somewhere and something's going to happen. And what did Dad want? Well, he's a funeral director. He probably wanted a big funeral. Not necessarily. So all the monies that are paid to a funeral home for a pre-need are not actually paid to the funeral home. They're put in a funeral trust. We can't keep the money. It has to go into a trust in your name, your social security number. It's your asset until the time of passing. Then at that time, we can apply for it with a death certificate and get the money transferred back to the funeral home. There's been some unscrupulous funeral directors around. I had the unfortunate task of closing down Ryder Funeral Home in South Hadley a few years ago, and there was $500,000 missing. They came in, they wrote a check out to Ryder's, they went out the back door, went to the bank, cashed it, went on their way, and I had to forensically put that whole mess back together again. So one of the things I hounded the State Board of Funeral Service was that make sure that the consumer is informed that it's their money and it goes into a trust. You should never write a check out to a funeral home for a pre-arrangement. You're not going to write it to Ahearn, you're going to write it to our trust company. We put it into an insurance policy, it's irrevocable, and it's protected in there. That's all set. All the funds deposited on the property of the person who pre-arranged their funeral, the funds remain your property until the time of passing. All our funeral costs are guaranteed, which means my side of the contract is the funeral home side. That's guaranteed. You live now 5 years or 50 years, we can't change the price of that. The sides we can't control are the cemeteries and newspapers. Those go up periodically over time. You know, so cemeteries, say St. Mary's Cemetery in Northampton is $800 open and grave. We put aside that amount in the pre-arrangement, but it might go to up another $100 or $200. And obituaries jumped tremendously during COVID. We went from pre-COVID $100 obituary to typically our obituary is $400, now $500. We encourage you a small, simple one. Our website is free. You can put 2,000 words on our website. And people use social media now. It's amazing how much gets driven through that. We check on obituaries and 300, 400, 500 people will come in and take hits on that and share it out. So there's ways around those costs. The cemeteries and newspaper, the clergy, again, are all guaranteed due to unforeseen circumstances beyond the control of us. I can't control what those people charge, but usually we'll put a baseline in there, and then typically the funeral trust earns some interest, but they don't give us big interest. It's a half a point at the most. So yeah, it's just the money's in there, it's protected, but they don't give us big interest because they know it's there specifically. So there's 2 ways to do that. And that's about it on that subject, really. I'm going to answer questions as we go along, so maybe more detail. I think, is that our last one?
Yeah.
Questions? So there we go. And I know Sam is here with a microphone.
Before moving to this, hi, Jamie Thurber. Before moving to this area, we were living in Windsor, Connecticut, where we were both teachers. We have a grave already in the cemetery next to First Church in
Windsor.
But we would love to have a green burial. I think we have agreed on it. And we haven't yet checked with, I can't believe I can't remember the name of the funeral director in Windsor. He's all over the place.
Carmen.
What is it?
John Carmen.
Carmen. When we bought these plots in 2000 and whatever, they were really cheap. Whatever. I think we still want them because our children have more of a connection with there. But do you transport, you sound terrific, but do you transport from Green Burial over to, that's northern Connecticut, 35 miles from here?
Yeah, yes, we do. So
You do?
we would make arrangements with your cemetery and find out, that's the first thing you should do is check with them to see if they allow Green Barrel in your cemetery.
Yeah.
That'd probably be first and foremost.
That's-
And then you can make a decision from there. John's a great guy. Carmen, Rick, and his son, they're very good people. I've known them for most of my life. And if you explain that our cemetery does not accept Green Barrel, John, what do? They'll try to work with you down there to say, okay, let's find you a Green Barrel ground in Connecticut. Maybe that cemetery may purchase the graves back. May purchase the graves back. So that's an option.
Thank you.
You're welcome. 2 hands.
So someone wants to be, say we want to be cremated, but our kids would like to come see us and see it beforehand without a big deal. Like even, could they see us in our home, would we have to go through embalming, or can you go through death? Be in your home where your kids can see you and then be cremated? Or do you have to be embalmed somewhere in there or go someplace?
So
inside?
typically, if you pass in a home situation, more often than not, hospice is probably involved. I'm sure when you went through the hospice program, they explained that. And families will say, gee, mom or dad's passed, but the family's coming up, and I'll say, what kind of a time bracket are we looking at?
Okay.
We just had a young professor the other day from Smith College. She ran the fine arts and the theater program over there, and the husband called us and said, I want to keep her here. And she stayed 24, almost 36 hours at the home. Circumstances were perfect. The weather, I encouraged him to put the air conditioning, but he wanted her with him as long as possible. And we don't discourage that. And if somebody's flying in from out of state, you would return to her care. You don't need to be embalmed to be viewed. It's not a law. And
Okay.
funeral directors hate me for this because you don't need to be embalmed. I can bring you back. I can make sure you're bathed, cleaned, grab you some clothes, set your features. We'll place you in a refrigeration. When the family comes in, excellent state of preservation. I don't worry about it.
So if someone dies in the home, they can stay in the home for about how long?
I would, depending on the
Okay.
weather,
Yeah.
it affects everything.
Yeah.
No two people are alike. But 24-hour, 12-hour period is okay.
And then go to the embalming?
Yep.
Can be done, okay.
Yeah, and then come to the funeral. If you're going to be cremated, well, I'm not going to embalm you. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put you in refrigeration. We use refrigeration, a cold room, and it preserves you it slows the process down, and you don't need to pay for the embalming. So we'll set your features, get you dressed. Somebody will come in. We'll have a viewing on the old-fashioned table with just a bedspread on. We put a little pillow under your head. We had a service this morning for Mr. Riley. He came up, and the family wanted to see him. He passed last week, and his sister came in with her daughter, and they spent about half an hour with him. And he went to the crematory.
At the funeral home?
Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you.
On the one.
Could you please use the mic?
Oh, sorry. I'm mic shy.
Okay. My burial plot is in Connecticut, but I live here. So my question is, do I need a funeral home here in Massachusetts and one in Connecticut? I'll be buried in Connecticut.
Do you have a funeral prearranged down in Connecticut with a funeral home?
Well, I've already talked to Chris Nealon at the funeral home in New London.
Good.
So I don't know if I needed someone here as well as in New London.
So typically what happens if Chris is down in New London, I'm here, he would call me if something happened during the night and say, hey Chris, this is Chris Nealon. We've had a passing locally. They don't come right up here right away. Can you give us a hand? Funeral homes work together as a group. So they'll call and say, can you help us out? I say, I'll pick up the person, we'll bring them back to the funeral home, and then you guys come up tomorrow and make the arrangements to transfer them back. And typically they absorb that cost on their end. So you really don't need a funeral home here unless you're having a service or a formal service. So I had a passing out in Boston the other day. I called a funeral home, a friend of mine, I said, gee, I've had a passing over at one of the hospitals. And I said, can you do me a favor, you make the transfer, and I'll be out tomorrow and zip out and pick them up and bring them back. So we keep our costs down.
I don't need to pay for 2 funeral homes?
No.
So if I tell Chris to call you?
Tell him, call us at Ahearn's, we'll take care of things, and we'll hold on to you until he needs you, and then return you to his care. Yeah, it's a simple thing. It's a courtesy. A lot of the funeral homes do it back and forth. It's so hard to get a phone call at 3 a.m. and someone's on the Cape. Well, we're not going to get dressed and tear down the Cape. I'm going to call one of my friends on the Cape and say, hey, can you give us a hand, and vice versa. We get calls all the time locally, yeah. So it's work together.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
I know of a plot in Vermont where they just take for green burials, they just put the corpse into the ground. It's a forest. And so there's no such thing as a plot as such. And I wonder if that in Massachusetts.
Tom, can you use the microphone?
Is it necessary to have a specified plot as you have, for example, with inhumations for a green burial? Or can it be just as in Vermont? I think the one that's in Roxbury, Vermont is just a forest. And I don't know how they would designate a plot. Or if they, even in Massachusetts, if there are plots, how do they say with that family for decades? How does it all go?
That cemetery, I actually went to it in December. I brought somebody up there, but the family did make those arrangements with the cemetery. So it would be the same way in Massachusetts. You reach out to the cemetery and they actually give tours. They can show you what they have available and you get to choose exactly where you are. But same thing, you do reserve a spot there beforehand if you'd like. You don't always have to, but the offer is there if you'd like.
Massachusetts general law does not allow us to bury you in your backyard. We can't do that. If you're cremated and you're buried in the backyard, that's acceptable. I just tell you, bury the ashes far enough away from the house that when you